Either I have fun or I work, right? We set up what are called false dichotomies. And false dichotomies are the things that make us crazy. Sometimes they're called double binds, depending on how you relate to them. But this idea of we set up a false duality. We say either I have pleasure or I have purpose. Huh? No, those are different dimensions, so we want to tease out the dimensions. So the part about best of both worlds that is most, you could say, tangible, is that anytime you think you're faced with an either or, it's a mistake. You've got a false dichotomy, because fortunately the world is designed so that optimal is always good, right? There's always an optimal distinction. So if you've got a false dichotomy, either I do this or I do that, what it means is the way that you're thinking about the issue is collapsing two different dimensions, such as, let's say, prosperity and pleasure. It's collapsing them down into one. Instead of going, wait a minute, how do I have prosperity and pleasure? You get stuck in this, it just goes down to one. Either I have prosperity or I have pleasure. So sometimes it's called a false dichotomy. When psychologically, when you're looking at systems, you often call it a double bind, when the entire system agrees you either do this or that, and you lose either way. So that's a double bind. Another way of thinking about it is what Aristotle used to call the golden mean. And the golden mean says that whenever you never want to go to extremes, you always want to go to the moderation, because the moderation is where the juice is. That's where the real good stuff is. And Aristotle's just wrong about this. Right? This has been a tremendous philosophical idea that because it was in Aristotle, it went into the Muslim world through Avicenna and the Aristotelian original Islamic thinkers, and then it came back from Islam back into Europe through the Renaissance, and especially in Aquinas and the people who followed after him. And a classic example of Aristotle is when he talked about courage. For example, he described courage as the golden mean, kind of the average, the center, the knife's edge center of a dimension that on the one hand is foolishness and foolhardiness, where you're not taking care of things, so you just do crazy things on the one hand, versus being a coward on the other and being too fearful. And that courage is this golden mean between being too fearful on the one hand and being too foolish on the other hand. Right? Well, when you look at that, you say, oh, okay, that's kind of, I guess that kind of makes sense. But how do you draw that boundary? It's not particularly helpful. And fundamentally, it's just based on a mistake. There's at least two dimensions involved in courage. On the one hand, there's the dimension of, are we going to be foolish or are we going to be smart? Right? On the other thing, are we going to take appropriate risks? Are we going to stand in the willingness to fail? Versus, are we going to just avoid all failure? And so, if we take this same quadrant idea, and the same idea of what we want to do is differentiate out the two dimensions. We want to distinguish between them. So on the one hand, we've got being smart versus being foolish or stupid. Okay. On the other hand, we've got the between being willing to risk and unwilling, too fearful. Okay. Now, again, once you break a false dichotomy, a double bind, some attempt to do a golden mean, once you break it into its separate dimensions, then it becomes much easier to understand. In this quadrant, we've got you're willing to risk, but you're foolish. right? This is, yeah, I'm going to fly off the cliff. That's not courage. That's stupid riskiness. On the other hand, you've got stupid fearfulness. Oh my gosh, I don't want to go outside because someone might see me and they'll put the evil eye on me, or someone might think that I'm too something, and then my life will be devastated. Right? It's not just fear. It's a stupid fear. Right? But then down in this bottom quarter, we've got smart and unwilling to fear. So we say, oh, you know, sometimes you could lose money in the stock market. I know that you can lose money in the stock market, and so I'm just never going to invest any of my money. All of my money goes into my mattress. Okay? So it's kind of a smart reasoning, but there's an unwillingness to risk, and so it's suboptimal. What is courage? Courage is when you're smart and willing to risk, where you make smart choices about what you're willing to risk. And it's this, again, this best of both worlds, where you say, I'm not going to get into any fight, but I am in war. I'm not going to get into any fight. I'm going to get into the fights where I believe I can win, where it's most likely to lead to the kind of results that I want. I'm going to invest in the kinds of learning activities and stocks and property and relationships that make sense to me. I'm going to have to be vulnerable. I'm going to have to put my heart and soul and capital on the line, but I'm going to do it in a smart way. I'm not going to be so afraid that I'm not willing to try, because then I end up alone. I have to be vulnerable if I want intimacy. But I don't want to be vulnerable with assholes, right? I don't want to be vulnerable with people who can't handle what it is I'm going to offer. And so we end up with smart and willing to risk. And this is again where we get this curve, where most of the choices in this set, 75% of the choices, are not particularly good. So you're only over at 75% before you kind of get above the line in terms of what you want. But once you get smart and willing to risk, the more you cycle on that, the more you get an exponential growth towards better results. So this is, you could say, the advanced part of the best of both worlds, which is that anytime you find yourself unable to find a best of both worlds solution, it's typically because you've taken multiple dimensions and collapsed them down into one and created a false dichotomy, put yourself into a double bind, and then you try to go for some kind of golden mean. Oh, well, yeah, I'm not going to be too vulnerable, but I'm not going to be too open. Right? Well, no. You want to find the right people and then be as vulnerable and as open as you can possibly imagine. You want the maximum on all dimensions. Just like you want to be smart and willing to risk. If you're just willing to risk and you're stupid, not good. If you're just smart but unwilling to risk, not good. You want the best of both worlds, just like you want prosperity and pleasure and purpose for yourself and others and the environment or context. Tomorrow in the long term, today in the short term, and in eternal now, right now at each and every moment of experience. And that both and, that best of all possible worlds, or best of both worlds, is the essence of this seventh rule. Always choose the best of both worlds, the magic of integration. So hopefully that helps clear up that particular piece. And I've got some more videos that I've been working on, but I thought I'd just do this one quickly because I can do it off the cuff and give it to you as a gift for for not having figured out the email for the last couple weeks. Okay, catch you guys.